You want to improve your positional skills, right? You want to become a good strategic player who knows what to do when there is nothing to do. Today, I will show you two crucial skills that will make you a great strategic player. Those two skills are, let's begin with this example, white to play. Let's do active testing. How would you treat this position as white pieces? What are you seeing? That's the most crucial first step. We are talking about vision in this episode, folks. We are talking about the first skill of seeing good or bad pieces. In other words, improving our skills for feeling for the pieces. When you're looking at pieces in this position, for example, the bishop on a2, what are you seeing? Is this a good bishop or a bad bishop? That's the fundamental skill to develop to become good strategic players. I'm going to show you today exactly what I mean by instructive and clean examples with lots of explanations, but I want active engagement. I want you to constantly ask the why question to change your perception, because chess expertise mostly lies in perception. You need to change the way you're seeing the chessboard, and to improve our strategy, feeling for the pieces is step number one. Because if you fix that, if you have good vision for the feeling for the pieces, your pawn play will also improve. You will start forming plans in the middle game, also in the end game and so on. This bishop on a2, folks, is a terrible piece. It's blunted by the entire pawn chain. Zero activity. This bishop has no targets right now, also lacking mobility. The bishop has no squares to move from a2. The bishop is crying, right? Let's continue. Let's look at the black pieces, because that's crucial as well, to look at the enemy pieces and see whether they are feeling good or bad. How about this knight on h6, folks? This knight, to my mind, is a terrible creature, don't you think? Just like our bishop has no future squares from that square, dominated by the pawn chain entirely, lacking mobility. In fact, no squares whatsoever to move from h6. So our first observation is telling us in this closed position, both pieces, bishop and the knight, are terrible. So, given this observation, given this orientation phase, you will formulate a plan. You see the connection? You see a bad piece, and that plan is emerging accordingly. Well, what's the plan? To improve our terrible bishop, right? So, tell me the good move for white then, folks. Of course, we go c3. The idea is to make our bishop happy, because on this diagonal the guy will have more mobility, also will coordinate with our pieces later, will support our pawn break of f4, f5 on the king side and so on. The bishop is clearly better on this diagonal. But how do you see it, right? Most beginners never ask themselves those questions. They don't see how terrible this bishop is on a2, so they commit chess crimes by burying their own pieces. Now, white has a beautiful plan. For example, black can make some moves. You either play bishop b1, but this will make this rook sad and crying. So white should play the move rook e1, and then whatever black does, right, bishop b1. And your bishop is thanking you for this small little improvement. You formed a plan and activated your terrible bishop. Now, I will show you the connection between piece activity and pawn play. In the actual game, a chess crime is taking place, folks. White player went g5, and when I see moves like this, I'm like, oh my god, what's going on? What is going on? You will end up in my future courses on chess crime and punishment sequel, right? I already created one course on Chessable about this, chess crime and punishment. It's full of such strategic, unforced errors. By going g5, what are you doing? You're helping that terrible knight in reaching this f5 outpost. Look what you have done to your position. This pawn was burying that knight. That knight was crying in this position. By pushing the pawn impulsively, you awakened your enemy pieces, right? The knight is now reached an outpost. An outpost means those strong squares that cannot be controlled by enemy pawns. Please pay attention to this knight on f5, folks. There is no white pawn that can go to g4 or e4 and chase away this knight from this post, which means the knight becomes an amazing piece on that square. So you basically, by playing g5, you created a monster, a beast, from a sleeping beauty on h6. This knight was totally tamed, right? On h6, zero activity, no potential, and suddenly we are dealing with an amazing beast on f5. You see, what is coming first? The first observation is this, right? Feeling for the pieces, the fundamental skill that you have to get better. When you look at this knight, can you see how bad it is standing on h6? Because if you do it, then these moves are not in your radar. You dismiss them out of hand without any calculation, more or less, right? You understand that's a clear chess crime. But if you have no such understanding, then you're impulsive. Hey, I'm attacking on the king side, push the pawn. And then you see a move knight f5. I was like, oh my god. This also connects to pawn play, of course. Every pawn move has a drawback. So before you push your pawns, you have to see what is becoming weakened. This pawn was controlling these two squares. The moment you roll the pawn, these two squares are no longer controlled by your pawn. So as you grow stronger, you should also breed the skill of looking at the drawbacks of your pawn moves and which squares are left behind. Another position to consolidate this lesson. Right now, there are more pieces on the board than the first position. Again, I want you to stop the video, talk to your pieces first. Orient yourself to the position. Which piece in the white camp is good and bad? And can we formulate an improvement plan? Folks, again, we are seeing a terrible bishop on a2. The bishop is blunted by the entire pawn chain, has zero mobility, it's crying on a2. What else? How about this knight? If I ask you, do you think this knight is happy or sad on c3? What would you say? Yes, the knight is extremely sad on c3, has zero potential, completely dominated by the entire pawn chain, cannot go to e4, cannot do anything from this square, cannot reach the c5 outpost and so on, just zero activity basically on c3. So the knight is misplaced and the bishop is misplaced. That's my first observation. Instantly, when I look at this position, this information is visible to a master's eye, right? I'm a candidate master, so I see these things directly in this position. And that's what you also need to get better at to play good positional chess. So once I see those terrible pieces, I have an improvement plan. So what do we do? How do we start this improvement plan, folks? You're a great player if you start with the move knight e2 first. Knight e2 paves the way for the c pawn to move. Why? Because I want to improve my bishop on this diagonal. Can you see it? Very simple improvement plan indeed. And black cannot do anything against that. I play c3, then I play bishop b1, and in 3 moves, look at the change. Those pieces are thanking you, especially the bishop, but also look at the knight. You're putting pressure on the target on f4. And that's the final skill I want to teach you in this episode, folks. Weakness awareness. This pawn is a clear target and weak in this position because we are putting pressure on that knight who is supporting that pawn. That pawn can no longer be guarded by the black pawn, thus that becomes a clear target. That was also one reason why you moved your knight to e2, by the way, to potentially threaten that weakness on f4. You see how we are combining, improving our terrible pieces and also orienting ourselves to the weaknesses in chess. If you consistently apply these skills, your strategic play will elevate. I can assure you that, 100% sure, that you will become a much stronger strategic player. That's the backbone of chess strategy, those 2 skills. That's exactly why I'm now working on a separate course or a book only about these concepts, only about these two skills, all right, to improve your skills, folks. For example, in this position, since the knight is attacked, if they move it to e7, we take on f4, and look at this. Look at your pieces. You improve them while also winning a pawn in the process. Then this will be a great follow-up position, folks. White to play in this position. Please stop the video. Try to orient yourself to the position. Talk to your good pieces, bad pieces, but very importantly, also be aware of the weaknesses in this position. All right? What will be your game plan here as white? Let's do it together, folks. Equal material. I'm seeing a much more active rook than my rook on h1. Rooks like open files. My rook is on a closed file right now. Their rook is better than mine. This knight on b7 is not doing anything on that square. My knight has some potential. What else are you seeing? I'm seeing this e5 outpost for my knight. That's a weak square. Why? Because no black pawn can control that square. That's a potential outpost for our knight in this position. But what makes this position really interesting is you should also be able to identify the final weakness in the position, namely the pawn on h7. Please focus on the pawn on h7, folks. Orient yourself to this weakness. Why is that a weakness? Because it can be exploited. We can go ahead and target that pawn, and since that pawn cannot be supported by any black pawn, they have to tie down their pieces. And that's a great improvement for white. Imagine if we press that pawn with knight g5, they have no other piece but the rook, their most active pieces, to do this. Because if they lose the pawn on h7, our pawn on h6 is very close to promotion. That's a very valuable pawn for black to lose. That's why they are tying down their most active piece. Can you just imagine the improvement for white that just took place? Going back, many people look at this square on e5, they look at their forcing moves, right? Because they are trained to look at those checks, and they totally ignore the most important essence in this position. The most important thing to orient yourself is the weakness on h7. If you go ahead and give this check, where is the follow-up? What's your follow-up? There is no follow-up. They still have a good rook in this position. But if you orient yourself to the weaknesses in this position, you go play knight g5, because you know that by attacking a target, you paralyze their rook. And that's a great skill that we are now combining. We are combining bad pieces, good pieces. This lesson teaches us a piece can become a great piece simply by hitting a weakness on the board. Because when you hit a weakness, you're tying down the opponent's pieces, right? So tell me the next move for white then. Let's continue. It's a beautiful puzzle. Once that rook has been paralyzed to passivity, what should we play? Of course, folks, you go rook a1 and you take the only open file. That's an amazingly beautiful puzzle. Can you understand the real beauty of this, folks? So what did we learn from this example? In this first position, the rook was beautiful, our rook was sad. Our knight had some potential, some choices. We chose g5 because we knew that piece activity is much more important than giving random checks without any purpose. White is playing planfully and they activate their rook, and now they are gaining the upper hand. I can show you a couple of more moves. White pieces gain great activity and you will take it from there. It's a great improvement for white compared to the first position. If I go back and show you its position again, it just looks like black will improve. They have the open file. They will invade the second rank. You must do something. And the improvement plan for white, notice that, revolved around the weaknesses and piece activity. One more example, white to play, folks. Let's apply this lesson and find a plan for white. How would you improve your position with white pieces? Let's talk to the pieces, folks. The knight is the worst knight in the world. Has no business on a3 whatsoever, right? That must be clear. No mobility, nothing to attack. Look at the rook, terrible on a close file. Look at the queen, also a terrible piece. Has nothing to do on a1. So we understand we have to improve those pieces. But how do you improve those pieces? That's the question now I will ask you, okay? What are you seeing? What is the second skill I'm teaching you today? It's weakness awareness, of course. You must see the pawn on e6 as a clear weakness in the position, clear target. Why? Because no black pawn can defend that pawn. Thus, we are forming a plan. The plan involves hitting the pawn with all of our forces, thus tying down the black pieces. We improve our terrible rook, attacking a weakness. There's one more reason behind the move. Well, maybe at some point the knight can do this. But maybe our knight has more potential in this position. We are coming there. Rook e8. What's the next move? Of course, queen e1. Our terrible queen improves while also hitting the weakness. This way, you're tying down their pieces. Their bishop is also quite bad. Please notice that. That's a dark square bishop, and the pawns are on dark squares. This bishop has zero mobility, nothing. So comes my question to you folks. What is the final piece that needs to be improved? Of course, our sleeping knight on a3, right? How do you improve this piece? That's my question to you now. Please stop the video. You have choices. Orient yourself, please, to the weaknesses and tell me the idea for white. Folks, can you see the outpost square on e4. This square cannot be guarded by any black pawn. And when you look at a position like this, you should easily spot this ideal destination for your knight, because knights love to stay on outposts like this because they are very close to the center, no pawn can chase them away, and they have great influence in squares like this. So reverse engineer your way, please. How does your knight go to e4 in this position? Right, you form a plan accordingly, right? You start from e4, then you reverse engineer your way to this square b1, right? You basically start from the dream position and you try to reverse your way to your knight that is standing right now. So knight b1 becomes a great idea for white. You see how white is orienting all of their pieces in terms of weaknesses. Look how in only 4 moves, white has improved tremendously his position. Now just go back again. Terrible 3 pieces, totally disorganized, discoordinated, and look what white is doing. That's the secret sauce of playing good positional chess. If you internalize this lesson today, your strategic play will really raise, folks. You'll raise your floor, you will stop committing chess crimes. In this position, we can play knight e4 directly, but you can also say very logically, why don't we just go here and put pressure on the weakness even more? That's also logical. Here white has 2 very good plans indeed. And knight f3 is a very logical move, forcing bishop g7. Look at this. All 3 pieces are babysitting the weak pawn on a5, right? Pieces hate this. In chess, the last thing pieces want to do is to go and tie down themselves in guarding a weak pawn. In fact, I made a video about this, of course. That's the main reason why weak pawns are bad. Not because of pawns themselves, but our pieces are getting tied down in guarding that stupid pawn. You see the difference? When you look at a position like this, you should be able to see it very, very quickly that white is the one who is pressing on the weakness and black is totally tied down. So this could be an evaluation exercise. How do you evaluate this position? Well, your strategic understanding, which is developing today, should guide you that white is preferred. Because a piece becomes active in chess when they press a weakness, right? Think about that. One way to activate your pieces is to find a weakness and attack it. Because when you attack it, their pieces are getting paralyzed. They are becoming on the back foot. This means you grab the initiative. You can either intensify the pressure or create the second front, right? Because you're controlling this game. Think about that. You're always keeping them in check. They cannot do anything to you. They are babysitting that pawn. And that's a great thing to understand in chess, right? I can show you so many more examples, but this is the gist of what I want to show you today, right, guys? Just think about that. After this lesson, you will stop committing chess crimes that is so visible below 1200 or 1000 on chess.com, right? For example, just to give you a very simple example, Tarokan, if white goes e5, do you know that like in lower levels, that's a very common move, e6? People keep playing this move, maybe like 24% of the time, like below 900 ELO, chess.com, or 800. That's a very pervasive move. But tell me, please, what this move is doing to your position. Which piece is crying as a result? Of course, the bishop on c8 is crying, so these moves should be discarded out of principle. But if your feeling for the pieces did not develop yet, if you didn't watch this video before, right, you're committing chess crimes without even knowing them. This will be your homework position, folks. Please look at this position, ask yourself those questions, and formulate a plan for white. How would you treat this position with white pieces, okay? Talking about pieces, worst place pieces, and can we improve? Maybe using some pawns, as we learned today, right? The idea is to improve the skill by also looking at those targets, potential weaknesses, and find those multi-purpose moves that give us all this. Folks, these are 2 crucial skills that I want you to get better. I think most of positional chess, strategic play, can be boiled down to these 2 fundamental core processes. Feeling for the pieces, namely, when you look at a piece, can you identify whether the piece is good or bad? And weakness awareness. When you look at a chessboard, can you quickly identify what is weak and not? Because once you do this automatically and quite fast, then simple decisions will be easier to make. Simple decisions meaning that they are not forcing moves, they are not winning tactics. You still need to improve your position, which means maybe 80% of all chess decisions are such simple decisions. Hence, the value of this training, because once you build these core skills, you will have easier time finding those improving moves and justifying those moves in terms of such principles. And that's why I'm working on a course or a book specifically on these fundamental skills that I talked about today, folks. Feeling for the pieces, connecting it to weakness awareness to find great strategic plans, and always asking the why questions. That's the way to move forward. That's the way to improve. And hopefully, after this video, your vision has changed, because it's all about perceptual change. Chess expertise. Chess experts have different vision. They see the board differently than amateurs, and this is the fundamental way to do it. By rich and clean exercises, why questions always, deeper engagement with the material, and seeing how those things are connected, basically. That's the way to improve your positional skills. All right, folks. Thank you so much for today. If you liked the video, folks, please give me a like and subscribe so I can continue producing similar content for you. I'm really doing it to help you get better at this beautiful game, and I'm doing my best to increase the instructional value of my videos. Bye-bye.